joining us with another episode of Technically Speaking, where we're highlighting trailblazers within the tech ecosystem who are doing amazing things that can help us along our journey. This morning, I have with me Jesse Owens. He comes to us with a robust knowledge of technology within the product management space. He has 14 years of experience in various product development capacities, spanning across multiple industries, digital payments, investment banking, education, and consumer technology. Currently, he's the Chief Product Officer at SoloFunds, leading the vision of building an equitable and affordable peer-to-peer consumer lending marketplace for borrowers and lenders. In addition to vast leadership experience, he's earned a digital payments patent along with being an award-winning product manager. Thank you, Jesse, for your time today. How are you?
I'm doing well, Lisa. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. I want to kick this off by asking, what has your journey in technology been? Because I will say this, I do know Jesse personally, and I consider him a Fintech expert. He has done so many amazing things, and I'm so excited to have him share these things this morning. So walk us through your journey within technology.
Yeah. So I think when I take a moment to reflect back on my journey, I think about my time in undergrad at Norfolk State University, which my father actually graduated from with a technology degree. And I would be remiss if I don't mention him when I'm talking about my journey and kind of reminiscing on kind of what inspired me to pursue a career in tech. It was primarily due to seeing my father at home, building up, breaking down computers, setting up the home network, getting my mother upset because he's changing all the passwords, and also like getting a better appreciation, not just the hardware, but also what actually goes into what you build software on top of. So like looking at all like the internals of a computer, and like what different aspects of a computer can allow you to write robust software to create experiences for end users. So I was more of a software person because I had just an interest in video games and just wanted to be the person creating the video games as opposed to kind of building the system. So that journey kind of started from there. And then while I was at Norfolk State, I was able to get exposure to different facets of technology, whether that be information security, genetic algorithms, as well as distributing databases, which is cloud computing, what the cool people call it today. But back then, these were very, almost abstract or kind of opaque concepts that I was doing research in back in 2004, 2005. Fast forward to 2007, and I packed my bags and I moved to New York to pursue a career in investment banking, and that's where I essentially started my career at JP Morgan. And so I would just kind of frame it as it was an opportunity for me to truly put what I've learned to test, and really having a lens in terms of how to build like high frequency trading systems, and being the engineer on a team of senior engineers building systems that are moving trillions of dollars a day. It was quite overwhelming, but it was also reassuring that, I came from a school that prepared me for these moments, and it was just leaning into kind of what I was taught and just following through on that. What I will say as well, during that journey, if you follow the timeline, 2008 was a very pivotal year for society, for for the collapse of the economy, and just what that meant for banks, for individuals, job employment, homes, all those things came into question. And I think in that moment, in that instance, I started to think through what my purpose was in terms of what sort of legacy do I want to leave while pursuing a career in tech. So I started to map out a few different avenues and lanes I was particularly interested in. One was education, because I just have a great affinity for teaching and learning. Two, just having a place in music, just for my love for all types of music and genres and what have you, and then healthcare. So really, fintech was one that it became a love affair kind of later on in my tech career. What is that part of the consumer experience that we like, that everyone's connected to? And you essentially connect the dots, and you realize that payments experience is connected to everything that we do. And so it was very illuminating for me, and just looking at all of you're essentially limitless in terms of what you can sort of delve into with a fintech background, or and every company has a fintech component to it. And so it's really industry agnostic, and you also get great exposure to understanding just how fundamental money is moved to and from entities.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and it's great that you brought up that. And I recently just had this conversation with someone when they were talking about fintech, and I was like, well, fintech is a part of every company. Every company is trying to have revenue. How do they collect their revenue? If they have some sort of payment option, that's considered fintech. It's how money is transferred and moved. So that's great that you brought up that point. So let me ask you this. It seems like it doesn't seem like, I know for a fact, you started off as a software engineer, and now you're in the space of product management. What do you feel like are some of the core values that helped you transition into this space? Because, I started off as an engineer as well, and then I ended up in the product management space, but in two separate industries, because, I'm more so in media. But what are some of the core values that you feel like really helped you become this chief product officer we see today?
Yeah. Thank you. I think that's a question that I feel like the great product managers ask themselves every day, like why they're showing up. And kind of what that looks like is being able to contextualize what you do, and how the business kind of benefits from the work that you do, but also understanding how your work is connected to different parts of the business. So it's really understanding fully end to end how the business makes money, how the different departments are instrumental in the success of that business, and how the work that you do can enable them or hinder them from being successful. With product kind of touching, an array of departments, it's important that you have that sort of context, and that way you know how to show up for those leaders in those departments, and also you can craft strategies and processes and even products that can help sort of amplify what that group does. Because what you'll try to understand is kind of what we do as a business externally, but then there's a lot of interrelationships with those departments in order to execute on those strategies that are executed externally, and communicating and conveying that. So all that being said, servant leadership is like an umbrella, but part of that is understanding how the business works, how the departments within the company are interrelated into your business strategy, And then there's like the execution. It's how we're actually going to do it. And I think the engineering background definitely helps with having frameworks and models of how to kind of execute on delivering a product or a feature out to market, and that in a repeatable and pragmatic way.
Yeah, I definitely agree. That's something, and I mentor a lot of different individuals who sometimes are looking to get into product management. And, you know, they oftentimes say, like, what are some of the best way that I can really understand how to build the best product? And not to be biased, I always say, well, I used to be a software engineer. So I actually know how to build the product. So that's why I'm able to come in as this product manager and say, this is how it should be built, because I can actually buckle down and build it if I had to.
Yeah, and I think to that point, I think one of the things I would encourage listeners is to don't be afraid to do case studies on existing companies that are in industries that you want to be a part of. What I found that was really helpful on my journey was, going through, quarterly earning reports, how that strategy is being communicated, and then how well are they being executed. So you can go from understanding the strategy, but then you can look into the technology as far as like how they've executed on those plans. And it's really interesting when you kind of do a scan across industries.
I hope that everyone just caught that gem, because that is something that is vital, especially if you want to be an amazing product manager. You like doing these case studies, yes, for sure. It also teaches you, I feel like, what not to do when building your product. Some of the companies who are not succeeding, it teaches you, all right, you learn from others' mistakes.
Exactly.
So what I will say, the bulk of your background has been in fintech. Do you think that this is your passion within the ecosystem?
Yeah, 100%. Fintech is something that's near and dear to me. The goal for me is create access to capital for all, addressing some of those pain points, and ensure that it's kind of where I'm doing well by doing good. So it goes beyond just having a job.
Yeah, that's one thing that I always advise people, especially with any area within the technology ecosystem. It's such a vast industry. I always say, go for what your passion is. Figure out, what do you like to do and how can it translate into technology? Because I feel like that's where you're going to be your best servant. Like, that's where you're going to be able to serve and bring your best to the table. So, one last question before we go, regarding product management. As a chief product officer, what traits do you consistently observe in junior product managers that are making them successful?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll start with a few, and I'll just expand upon what I'm specifically looking for in those traits. One is curiosity. 2 is leadership. And then the third one, it's a composite of different skills, but I would just frame it as kind of audacious. So what I mean by curious is when you're, as a product manager, you are tasked to ideate, validate, and execute on concepts that can improve business outcomes, while creating, delightful user experiences. I think when you're tasked with with a responsibility such as that, you have to be curious and not be comfortable with the status quo. So you want to push the bounds on what we can actually do as a product team, and maybe pushing design, pushing engineering, not in a adversarial standpoint, but as an opportunistic. As far as here's what we're seeing in the landscape of our industry. Here's the problems that are yet to be solved. Here's our opportunities that we're hearing from our customers. Here's what we can do as a product and as a company. So kind of framing it as what we can do, how we're going to do it, and who we're actually intending on, building the solution for is what we're kind of what's important when you talk about framing. Leadership, when you take that curiosity, it's one thing of having the ideas. It's one thing of inspiring others to walk with you on that journey. What you'll find is that you'll have great ideas, but it either wasn't delivered well or just wasn't communicated in a way that everyone was able to galvanize around that idea or that concept. So I think that leadership quality is important, and being able to communicate at a level to where everyone can sort of join you on that journey is important, because as much as you'll read articles and they'll say, product managers are the CEO of the product. I think that's one of the greatest fallacies in terms of what I do, because quite often you are facilitating and you are a partner with other groups within the organization in order to get things done. And in order to foster those partnerships, you have to know how to communicate and know what resonates with those stakeholders. And then I think with the being audacious, so oftentimes when you're starting out as a PM, you're typically given a roadmap and you're asked to execute. Yeah. Right. And that's kind of your lane, and typically you'll stay in that lane. I think over time, when you start to build domain knowledge, you will be given a strategy, blank canvas. They'll say like, hey, Lisa, we're thinking about moving into this adjacent market. Help us build products and solutions that will help us get us closer into this particular vertical. Right? So now you're kind of asked to execute on a strategy. Then it's, hey, Lisa, why don't you lead a team that's going to be tasked to build products and solutions for this strategy. So there's sort of like this progression of kind of roles and responsibilities of a PM, and it's a bit of a understanding how do you quickly validate opportunities for product market fit. Mm-hmm. How do you lead others, and then how do you lead the company into new horizons, new opportunities. So it's a tough question to ask, because product is very contextual and there's a lot of different moving parts. It's different than being a great engineer. Yeah. Kind of like you either write great code or you don't. And product, it's a bit of a continuum, because you're asked to do different things along your journey. Mm-hmm, for sure. And so if I'm looking at someone as a junior PM, I'm really looking for them to be, flawless in their execution. Yeah. Initially, and then as I'm looking at their career growth, if they're looking to be an individual contributor or they're looking to be a team lead, I'm going to look for other skill sets. If I'm looking for them to kind of expound upon their ability to execute, I want them to kind of think through or to craft a strategy, because that's a different skill. Because now you're not given something, you're asked to create, and then you're creating, and then you're also directing. So there's a number of different skills that you have to exude in order for that to become a reality. So there's a couple different skills that I look for, but it's sometimes it's unfair to expect for all of those things to happen in one fell swoop. It's like, so it's, my advice is to, for younger PMs out there, is to think through think through how you want to grow and develop, and just making sure that you keep those parts of your growth and development in mind, because you want to be empowered to kind of run and deliver on things that you've hypothesized, things that you've validated, and ultimately you want to execute on those things.
Yeah.
I think there are some skills that can be cultivated and nurtured along that journey. And I think it's just really having that personal roadmap for yourself as a product manager, and kind of going back to what we was mentioning earlier, and just having a point of view of what's happening in and across industries to help inform a perspective, so that you can start to be given those opportunities to own a strategy, to own a roadmap, to direct the team. Because all those things will come to fruition with the work that's put in when no one else is looking.
Yeah, for sure. I like to think that you have to be an amazing leader overall, because that's what a product manager is. You're really a leader and a pillar within a company, because you are building this product that a company wants to monetize. So that's why I oftentimes call myself a monetizer. I come in and I make you money. That's what I do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a great way of framing it. And like sort of, and what you're also presented with as a PM is just, you're presented with a lot of ideas.
Yeah.
And you have to have a framework of how to distill those ideas into a strategy that is comprehensive and that actually makes sense, and that's actually feasible. So there's like having a sense of feasibility is so important as well, because I think that those types of managers can quickly tease out if something's ready to be executed on, or it requires a bit more work, maybe some research and development before it's ready for it to be executed in the roadmap. So I think those are some distinct skills that I do find helpful, because it can help direct teams on next steps, as opposed to maybe spending a bit more time than you would like on things that, quite frankly, we're just not ready for.
Right. You have to make sure that these ideas are aligning with the company strategy, because, we'll sit in sprint planning meetings and all these things sound great, but do they fit with what's happening currently right now within the company trajectory? So.
Right. Exactly.
Yes. That led me to one other question, and a quick elevator spill. What is your day like as Chief Product Officer at SoloFunds?
Yeah. So I would say, a day in a life. I think a day in a life, it's a lot of contextualizing new as well as old information into what we're going to do for the near, medium, and long term. So I think for me, what's important is having historical context of kind of what brought us here today, understanding where the opportunities are in terms of what are the observations that we're currently seeing. Also, looking at what sustains the business today, but then also looking at what are some of the adjacent opportunities for what we do as a business, and what are some other use cases that aligns with our company mission, and that we can sort of build seamlessly in the product, and it's in line with kind of what we're doing from a mission standpoint, and then with that, providing context of how we plan on executing against those different sort of pillars within our business. So kind of taking a step back and taking it 50,000 foot and then kind of bringing it down and, providing like concrete perspectives on how to go about from an execution standpoint. So I think it's a lot of context switching, which is great. But then it's also kind of future-proofing what we do as a business and kind of what do we want to build from a product standpoint, as well as team composition, and like how does the team need to look in order for us to execute on these bold plans.
So a combo of like reverse engineering.
It is exactly. Yeah. Like looking at kind of looking at where we want to be and just working backwards. And what does that require? Does that require augmentation of teams? Does that require augmenting of our products, a combination of the two? And like what pieces do we actually build first and in what sequence? So it's yes, a lot of it is reverse engineering.
Yeah. That's oftentimes a lot of what leadership roles are, because you're oftentimes coming in and you're having to learn from the bottom up and how can I make this grow and, reverse engineering.
Yeah. And I think and this is something that I've observed in my earlier years with leaders that I really appreciated. They really took the time to understand how from a operation standpoint, how the company works prior to conveying ideas. Because sometimes you'll get in situations where there's leaders kind of imposing their thoughts on how things should be done without full context of how the business is ran. So there is great appreciation when there's kind of like a listening tour that's conducted by that leader, just to understand truly and fully where things are before formal plans are put together, or when things are kind of put on paper, and it builds that level of trust. And I think especially when you're as we're working remotely and you're building rapport with your team locally and abroad, building that trust by asking questions can go a long way.
Yeah, for sure. Rapid fire question.
Ooh, okay.
What's the last thing you Googled?
You know what? I was Googling Netflix, how Netflix does A/B experimentation.
Look at you, core techie.
Yeah.
Always doing a case study, always doing research.
Yeah, they actually got they really have really great content. And they actually have some great stuff on YouTube on some experiments that they ran.
Yeah, for sure.
And I was also looking at and just doing YouTubes on standardizing normal distributions. So like when you're looking at data, understanding the variance of that data and how it's proportional or not proportional to your historical data. So let's say like if I have an average conversion of X%, and this week I have a conversion of Y, how is that relative to what we've seen historically? And how do you understand like the variance or the likelihood of that number when you're comparing it to your historicals? So that's just something that I gravitate towards, because it's all about the data and interpreting that data and explaining what the data means is just as important as having the numbers at your at your disposal.
Well, see, people, this is how he's become this expert, this mastermind in product management. He's always learning. And that is a big thing about technology in general. You have to always be a learner within the technology ecosystem because technology, the only constant is change.
Absolutely.
Well,
couldn't agree more.
I want to thank you so much for taking time to speak with me today. Before we go, tell people how they can find you.
Oh, sure. So I'm available on all the socials, Twitter, Instagram, Jesse Owens II. That's the second. You'll also follow me on Medium as well. I occasionally write a few articles. I'm trying to get my journalism on things that are interesting and that is near and dear to me. So feel free to check it out. Give me a couple claps if there's some articles that you like. And also you can connect with me on LinkedIn. More than happy to build with you if you have an interest in product or would like some guidance or just want to pick my brain, or if it's something that you're working on and you want me to take a peek at, more than happy to take some time out and build with you.
Awesome. And that's rare, people, because a lot of people do not offer their time like that. So we thank you.